welcome to RADIX. Before we get into anything, I want to start with something practical. This app works on desktop through your browser, but it also functions exactly like a native app on your phone. If you're on an iPhone, open the app in Safari, tap the share icon at the bottom of the screen, and select Add to Home Screen. On Android, tap the three dots in the top right corner of Chrome and choose Add to Home Screen. Once you do that, RADIX will appear on your phone like any other app. It launches full screen, no browser bar, and it behaves exactly the way you'd expect a mobile app to behave. I use it both ways, depending on what I'm doing. When I want to study deeply, I'm usually on desktop, and when I'm on the go and want to check a transit or ask the oracle something, I pull it up on my phone. Now, let me walk you through the entire system from the beginning. The landing page and signing up. When you first arrive at RADIX, you'll see an overview of what the system is and what it does. You can scroll through and get a feel for it. At the top right, there's a Get Started button. Go ahead and click that. You'll be asked to create an account with an email address and a password. Once you confirm your email and log in, the first thing the system asks you for is your birth data. That's where we're going next. Entering your birth data. This is the most important step in the entire setup, so take your time here. The system needs your full birth date, your birth time, and your birth location. The birth time is critical. I want to be straight with you about this. Please use the time on your birth certificate if you have access to it. It's extremely common for people to go off of a time their parents told them and discover later that it was off by 30 minutes, an hour, or more. Even a small difference can shift your rising sign and change the entire structure of your chart. And if you were born in a country that doesn't record birth times, or you simply don't have access to a birth certificate, there's a checkbox on the data entry screen that says, I don't know my birth time. Select that option. What happens is a rectification process that takes roughly a couple of hours, because it essentially mirrors the experience of sitting down with an astrologer and being interviewed about the major events of your life. The system works backward from those events to determine the most likely birth time. That said, if there's any way to get the exact time from an official document, I'd strongly recommend doing that first. It'll give you the most accurate results and save you a lot of time. After entering your birth data, you'll be asked to select your primary areas of focus, the life themes most relevant to you right now. This helps shape the first layer of context the oracle draws from when you start asking questions. The chart wheel, what you're looking at. Once your data is processed, you land on the dashboard and the first thing you see is your natal chart wheel. If you're new to astrology, let me give you a quick breakdown of what this visual represents, so nothing feels unfamiliar as we move through the rest of this walkthrough. The circle is divided into 12 sections called houses. Each house corresponds to a different area of life: your identity, your finances, your relationships, your career, your home life, your creative expression, and so on. Starting from the left side of the wheel at the point called the ascendant, the houses move counterclockwise around the circle. The symbols placed inside those sections are your planets. Every planet occupies a specific house and a specific sign. The signs are the 12 divisions of the outer ring of the wheel: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, and so on. The sign a planet sits in describes how that planet expresses itself. The house it sits in describes which area of your life it influences. The lines crossing through the center of the wheel are called aspects. These are the angular relationships between planets, and they describe how the planets in your chart interact with each other, whether they're working in harmony, creating friction, or some combination of both. The entire chart is a map of the sky at the exact moment and location of your birth. Every technique in this system builds from that foundation, generating your deep natal portrait and other reports. Once you're in the dashboard, the most important thing you can do first is generate your deep natal portrait. This is the foundational report that everything else in the system builds on. To access it, click the Tools tab in the navigation bar at the top of the screen. On mobile, tap the Tools button in the bottom navigation bar. Inside the Tools area, you'll see a list of all available report types. The Deep Natal Portrait is at the top. Click it and follow the prompts. I want to set an honest expectation here. Some reports, especially the Deep Natal Portrait, take several minutes to generate. The system's doing serious computational work. It's calculating your chart, scoring every planetary condition, running it through a multi-pass analytical engine, and producing a written document specific to your exact data. Please stay in the app while it processes. If you navigate away, it may interrupt the generation. The Deep Natal Portrait typically takes 8 to 12 minutes. Other reports are generally 2 to 5 minutes. The Deep Natal Portrait covers 13 sections: your chart ruler, your essential dignities, your house placements, your aspects, your timing cycles, and much more. It's the single most important thing you can generate in this system. Everything the Oracle draws from starts here. After the Deep Natal Portrait, the 3 reports that'll give you the most Oracle depth are the Transit Forecast, the Solar Return, and the Firdaria report. I'll go through each of those in the Tools section of this walkthrough. For now, just understand that the more reports you generate, the more context the Oracle has to work with when you ask questions. The Oracle, how it works, and why it gets better. Let me talk about the Oracle before we go any further into the interface, because understanding how it works will shape how you use everything else. The Oracle is an AI system trained on the doctrine of classical astrology that I've been studying for many years. I built the prompting architecture myself, and everything it produces is anchored to your actual chart data, not generalizations, not sun sign content, not anything like what you'd find in a horoscope column. The key thing to understand is that the Oracle answers from what it's been given. It doesn't make up planetary positions. It doesn't guess. When you ask it a question, it reads your chart data and every report you've generated and works from that material. The more reports you have, the more dimensions of your life the Oracle can access. A couple of specific examples of how this works in practice. If you've generated your transit forecast, the Oracle can speak to what the current sky is doing to your specific chart. And when key activations are building or passing, if you've generated your solar return, it can contextualize your year-ahead themes. If you've got your Firdaria report, it understands which planetary period you're in and can frame its answers within that timing. The Oracle also retains your previous conversations. At the top of the chat area, you'll see your past sessions listed, and the Oracle can cross-reference those earlier conversations. If you were asking about a career situation 2 weeks ago and you come back today with a question about a relationship, it can draw the thread between the two if they share underlying chart dynamics. This isn't a chatbot that resets every time you open it. It builds context over time. Inside the Oracle chat, you'll also see 2 buttons, one labeled Blessings and one labeled Obstacles. These are quick start prompts. The Blessings button can ask the Oracle to identify the areas of your chart that are working most strongly in your favor right now based on your current transits and timing. The Obstacles button asks it to identify where friction, delay, or challenge is most active. These are especially useful when you don't know exactly what to ask, but you want a grounded, chart-based read on where you are. The Explore tab. Now let me walk you through the Explore tab. On desktop, you access this from the navigation bar, and on mobile, it's in the bottom navigation. This is the deep study area of the app. When you open Explore, you're looking at your natal chart broken down into every layer of classical analysis. Let me go through each section. Your planets shows every planet with its sign, house, degree, and dignity status. The dignity status tells you how well placed each planet is, whether it's in its own sign, exalted, in detriment, in fall, or simply peregrine, which means it carries no special strength or weakness in that position. Aspects shows the angular relationships between your planets, conjunctions, oppositions, trines, squares, and sextiles, and explains what each one means in plain language. House cusps shows the exact degree of each house cusp, so you can see precisely how the wheel is divided for your chart. Timing and periods contains your annual profection year, which house is activated in your current year of life, and your Firdaria periods, which are the major and sub-period cycles from the Persian timing tradition. I'll cover those in more detail when we get to the timing tab. Essential Dignities is one of the most important sections in the app. This is the classical scoring system for planetary strength. It tells you which planets in your chart are operating at full capacity, which are in favorable territory, and which are under stress. Understanding your dignity map is foundational to understanding yourself through this lens. Outer influences shows the positions of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, along with their generational themes. I want to be upfront here. These planets aren't part of the traditional Bonatti doctrine that forms the core of this system. I included them based on my own observations and years of study, because it felt wrong to leave them out entirely. They function as background generational forces, the stage on which everything else is played. You can observe the patterns yourself. They don't operate as personal significators in the classical sense, but they're real and they're present. Lifetime Atlas gives you a long arc view of how your chart activations unfold across your entire lifespan. Fixed stars are also present in the Explore area, and I'll cover those more fully in the navigation panel section. At the bottom of each section in Explore, there's an oracle prompt, so you can jump directly from studying a specific area of your chart into a targeted oracle conversation about it. The tools, let me go through every report in the tools area, what each one gives you, and how it strengthens your oracle conversations. The transit forecast is your real-time sky report. It shows the current planetary positions overlaid on your natal chart, which houses are being activated, which natal planets are being triggered, and in the quality of those activations, you can generate this as a quarterly or annual report. This is the report that answers the question of what's happening right now and what's coming. It's the second most important report for oracle context after the deep natal portrait. Speaking of transits, inside the transits view in the chart area, you're not just looking at a static snapshot. You can move the time forward and backward using the controls in the transits panel. You can shift by the hour, by the day, by the week, or by the month. This lets you watch how the sky moves across your natal positions and see exactly when key aspects are forming, perfecting, and separating. If you want to generate a report for a specific future date, say you've got a major event coming up and you want to understand the sky for that moment, you can set the transits to that date and generate a report from there, or you can use the quarterly and annual options for the broader forecast window. The solar return is cast for the moment. The sun returns to its exact natal degree each year. It's your personal New Year chart. This report answers the question of what themes and activations define the year from this birthday to the next. It's essential for any question involving your year ahead, career changes, relationship shifts, major decisions, moves, or anything that unfolds over a year-long arc. The lunar return is cast for the moment the moon returns to its natal degree, which happens every 27 to 28 days. This is your monthly emotional weather report. It's excellent for near-term context. What's the quality of this particular month? What themes are activated? Where should your attention be? The Firdaria report covers the Persian timing system, a sequence of major planetary periods that each person moves through across their lifetime. Each major period is governed by a planet, and within it, there are sub-periods governed by other planets. If you've ever had the experience of one stretch of several years feeling fundamentally different from the one before it, a different quality, different themes, different results, that's Firdaria in action. This report interprets your current major period and sub-period and maps the road ahead. It's one of the most powerful tools in the system for answering questions about timing and life phases. The cycles report covers the big picture life arcs, Saturn returns, Jupiter cycles, the major recurring patterns that define the chapters of a life. If you're at a crossroads and want to understand where you are in the larger sweep of your story, this is the report for that. Solar arc and progressions deal with your inner development over time. Progressions operate on the principle that one day in the ephemeris equals 1 year of life. They describe the slow, symbolic evolution of your chart and personality. Solar arc advances every planet by the same arc as the progressed sun. Both of these techniques are particularly useful for understanding major inner shifts that often precede external changes in your life. Secondary progressions and solar arc aren't included because we're confused about doctrine. They're included because they've proven useful across centuries of practice and deserve a place alongside the medieval core. The app presents them clearly as later techniques from the Renaissance and modern traditions, while the medieval methods, Firdaria, Profections, primary directions, essential dignities, remain the primary interpretive framework. Primary directions is one of the oldest timing systems in this tradition and probably the most precise tool in the entire system for identifying turning points. It maps the long arc activations that correspond to the biggest events in a life. If you want to understand why a particular year was so significant, primary directions will usually have the answer. The Eclipse report pulls the solar and lunar eclipses most relevant to your natal chart over a window of your choosing, 3 months, 6 months, or a year. Eclipses on sensitive natal points tend to correlate with significant external events, arrivals, departures, sudden changes in direction, things that happen in ways you didn't fully plan. This report identifies which eclipses activate your chart and what the traditional doctrine says about them. And the synastry report is the full astrological anatomy of a relationship. You bring in a second chart, and the system maps the planetary interactions between the two conjunctions, oppositions, trines, and squares between one person's planets and the others. It shows where the chemistry is, where the friction is, and where the long-term compatibility lies. This works for romantic relationships, business partnerships, friendships, or any significant personal connection. The astrologer report is a technical, deep natal report written in the classical language of the tradition. If you want to go deep into the doctrine itself, the traditional delineations, the dignities and abilities fully scored, the sect conditions, the full hierarchy of planetary testimony, this is the report for that. Horary is a separate technique entirely. Rather than reading your natal chart, Horary casts a chart for the exact moment a specific question is asked. If you've got a pressing question, will this deal close? Where's a lost item? Should I take this particular job? Horary gives an answer from the chart of the question itself. It doesn't use your natal chart. Electional is the art of choosing the best time to begin something. If you're planning to launch a business, sign a contract, make an investment, schedule a medical procedure, or begin any significant action, electional helps you find a moment in the near future where the planetary conditions are most favorable for that intention. The timing tab. The timing tab collects all of the classical timing techniques in one place. I'll give you a brief overview of each section here, but for a deeper understanding of each technique, I'd refer you to the intro series, which I'll cover when we get to the content area, and Annual Profections is at the top. This is a simple and elegant system that activates one house of your chart per year of life, starting from the first house at birth and moving one house each birthday. Whatever house is active tells you the primary theme of that year. And the planet that rules that house becomes your Lord of the Year, the planet to watch most closely in the transits for that 12-month period. Firdaria shows the full timeline of your major and subperiods from birth to old age. We covered the Firdaria report in the tools section, but seeing the entire sequence laid out here gives you perspective on where you are in the arc of your own life and what planetary periods lie ahead. Zodiacal releasing is a more advanced technique that uses the lot of spirit as its foundation. It divides a life into major and minor periods and is particularly useful for identifying peak periods of professional and personal activation. This is a topic worth returning to as you build your understanding of the system. Primary directions in the timing tab shows your approaching arc directions, the long arc activations, building toward exact over the coming years. High leg and alkacodon are the classical techniques for assessing vitality and the broader arc of life. I include these for completeness and for the serious student. If you're newer to this tradition, this is one to come back to after you've built a foundation in the other techniques. Planetary hours rounds out the timing area. Every hour of every day is governed by a planet in a rotating sequence based on ancient Chaldean order. If you want to time a conversation, a meeting, a creative effort, or any action to a favorable planetary hour, this tool gives you that information in real time. The Lots tab. The Arabic lots, sometimes called the Hermetic lots, are a set of calculated points derived from the angular relationships between specific planets and house cusps in your chart. There are 14 of them available here, and each one speaks to a different dimension of your life. The lot of fortune is the most well-known. It describes your body, your material circumstances, and where things tend to work out for you in a practical and tangible way. The lot of spirit is paired with fortune and describes your mind, your will, and your soul's direction. Where fortune is what happens to you, spirit is what you make happen through intentional action. The lot of arrows speaks to your desires, your attractions, and what you're drawn toward. The lot of necessity speaks to constraint, obligation, and what you can't avoid. The lot of courage speaks to bravery and your capacity to act under pressure. The lot of victory speaks to achievement, success, and where you tend to win. The lot of nemesis speaks to the patterns that work against you when you're not paying attention to them. The lots are most powerful when read in relation to the rest of the chart, which houses they fall in, what planets aspect them, and how they're activated by the timing techniques. The account area. At the top right of the screen is the account button. Let me walk you through what's inside. Credits. The credit counter shows your current balance. Let me explain how credits work and why they exist. The vast majority of what RADIX offers is completely free. Just by signing up, you get access to your full natal chart. The Explore area with every layer of classical analysis, the timing panel, the Arabic lots, the sky calendar, the fixed stars, outer planet positions, the Eclipse catalog, the entire content library, and more. I want to be direct about this. Any other astrology software would charge you for the majority of these features, and most of them would give you a fraction of the depth. You get all of that at no cost. Credits are only needed for two things: generating reports and talking to the Oracle. Reports require significant computational work and AI processing. So credits let you buy exactly as much of that as you want and need. Edit birth data lets you change any part of your birth information. This is more important than it might seem. As I mentioned at the beginning, birth time errors are extremely common. If you generated your chart with a time you heard from a family member, and later you find out from your birth certificate that it was different even by 15 or 30 minutes, you'll want to update it here. Any reports you've already generated will reflect the old data, so you may want to regenerate the key ones after correcting. If you selected the option for unknown birth time and have since gone through the rectification process and received a confirmed time, this is also where you update that. Notes is one of the features I'm most glad I built into this system, that this is your personal journal within the app. You can write anything in here, observations, questions, things you've noticed that you want to track. What I've found in my own use is that when you keep notes consistently, especially over months, you start seeing patterns. And you might notice that every time the moon moves through a particular house, you have a certain kind of interaction. Or you might notice a recurring theme in your life that keeps appearing when a specific planet is activated by transit. If you treat these notes like an ongoing diary and cross-reference them with what's happening in your transits and timing, you start doing your own astrological research from your own life experience. That's genuinely one of the most valuable things you can do with this system. The invite button lets you share RADIX with others. If you bring someone into the platform, there are benefits for both of you. The details are on the invite screen. The Start Here button opens the same onboarding walkthrough that appeared when you first created your account. If you move through it quickly and want to revisit it, it's always available here. The boxes on the dashboard. Before I get into the left navigation panel, let me cover the RADIX news box is your connection to the weekly forecast and news content. On desktop, you click the box directly. On mobile, it appears as a button in the drop-down area. When you open it, you'll see the week's astrological forecast in a set of articles covering specific stories or themes in the world through the lens of that forecast. These are predictions written before the week begins and grounded in the actual planetary movements for that week and cast from geographic coordinates relevant to each story. There's also an Other Articles section where you'll find the intro series, a set of foundational articles I wrote to build your understanding of this tradition from the ground up, and additional pieces on various astrological topics. The Natal Portraits section is an ongoing project where I write deep profile pieces on notable historical and contemporary figures, walking through their entire life story through this astrological lens. Each portrait covers the chart structure, the key timing periods, how the traditional doctrine predicted or explained the major events of that life, and what the chart reveals about who the person was. These are worth reading not just for the subject, but because seeing the technique applied to a life you already know is one of the fastest ways to build real fluency with classical astrology. The lunar phase box shows you the current moon phase with a visual representation, the illumination percentage, the sign the moon is in, and the moon changes signs roughly every 2.5 days, so this is live data. I included this because lunar timing is one of the most immediately practical tools in this system. When you start tracking the moon's movement through your chart alongside your notes, you'll begin seeing patterns in your own emotional and energetic cycles. The Sky Calendar button opens the full celestial calendar, every planetary movement, every lunation, every eclipse, every ingress across the full year. If you want to see what's happening in the sky on any given date, this is where you go. I use it as both a planning tool and a reference. Staying aware of what's coming means you're never caught off guard by a major activation. The timing box on the dashboard shows you your current Annual Profection year and your active Firdaria period. Its purpose is simply to keep your timing in the front of your mind while you're working with the chart. It's easy to get absorbed in studying specific placements and forget the timing layer, which is often where the most immediately relevant information lives. The left navigation panel. Let me now walk through the left side navigation panel. Reports. The Reports button opens a panel showing every report you've generated, organized by type and sorted by date. This is your library. When you want to revisit a report you generated months ago, this is where it lives. Reports are saved to your account permanently and are always available here as long as your account is active. The alert system connects to your weekly email. Every Monday, you receive a personal astrological briefing for the week, what transits are active, what they mean for your specific chart, and what to watch for. The Alerts button allows you to see what transits are coming that week and talk to the oracle about what it means for you. This is not the typical generic astrology you normally get. Saved Threads shows your oracle conversation history. Every session you've had with the oracle appears here as an archived thread organized by date. This is your full record of past conversations. If you had a session several weeks ago that touched on something relevant today, you can come back here. Chart display settings lets you customize what appears on the chart wheel. If you're newer to the system and the full chart feels visually overwhelming, you can simplify the display, reduce the number of aspects shown, adjust the glyph sizes, change how labels appear. As you build fluency you can layer complexity back in. This is here, so the chart serves you, not the other way around. Zodiac Ages gives you the context of where we are in the great year, the roughly 26,000 year cycle of the precession of the equinoxes. Understanding the age of Aquarius and what that actually means historically and astronomically gives important macro context for why this moment in history feels the way it does. Outer planets covers Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, their current positions, their generational themes, and how they relate to the classical framework. As I mentioned in the Explore section, these aren't part of the traditional Bonatti doctrine at the core of this system, but based on my own observations over many years, it felt intellectually wrong to leave them out. They operate as background generational forces, the stage on which the drama of the classical seven plays out. The outer planets don't function as personal significators in the classical sense, but they're real and they matter. Fixed stars is one of the most ancient layers of astrological tradition, older than the zodiac itself. The Hellenistic and medieval astrologers observed certain stars as having consistent, reliable effects when conjunct with natal planets or sensitive points. Stars like Regulus, Spica, Algol, and Antares appear repeatedly in historical charts at moments of exceptional rise, fall, creative genius, or personal tragedy. Regulus conjunct the Sun or ascendant appears consistently in the charts of figures who achieved extraordinary prominence and often a corresponding fall when the character of the chart couldn't sustain the elevation. Algol, associated with loss and sudden endings, appears with striking precision in charts connected to violent or abrupt events. These aren't superstitions, they're observations accumulated over 2,000 years of careful record keeping. This section shows you which stars are conjunct your natal planets and what the traditional doctrine says about each one. The Eclipse catalog is a reference library of solar and lunar eclipses across a span of years. Eclipses that fall on or near your natal planets or house cusps are among the most powerful activators in this tradition. They tend to correlate with events that feel significant, and in some ways, fated arrivals, departures, sudden changes in direction. The catalog lets you look backward and forward, see which past eclipses activated your chart and which ones are approaching. You can bring this information directly into an oracle conversation to ask what an upcoming eclipse on a sensitive natal point might mean for you. Articles and natal portraits. If you see these buttons in the navigation panel, they're direct links to the same content available through RADIX News. I've placed them here so they're easy to reach without going through the news area. If anything feels redundant, that's intentional. Some of the most useful content in the system deserves more than one path to it. Birth Compass is a tool for understanding the geographic dimension of your chart, where in the world, different areas of your chart energy are most strongly expressed. Different locations activate different parts of your natal chart. And for people who live a mobile life or are considering a move, this can be genuinely illuminating. The RADIX method button covers the core philosophy and technical framework behind how this system works, the doctrine it draws from, the hierarchy of technique, and the reasoning behind how I built it. If you want to understand the intellectual architecture behind what you're using, this is where to go. New Charts lets you add other people's charts to the system. You can study anyone whose birth data you have family members, partners, colleagues, historical figures. When you pull up another person's chart, the system populates with the same depth of analysis available for your own. You can view their placements, their timing, their dignity scores, all of it. One important note about other charts, you can't generate reports for another person's chart. The reason is that several of the reports in this system require input from the individual context about their life, their questions, their focus areas. Without that direct input, the report would be missing the layer of customization that makes it meaningful. The system's designed to serve each person individually, and that requires the person themselves to be engaged with it. What you can do with another person's chart is run a synastry. When you open the synastry tool from the tools area with another person's chart loaded, the system generates the full relationship map between your chart and theirs. You can save that synastry and it'll appear in the left navigation panel in its own section. Any synastry charts you've saved will be accessible there, so you can return to them without reloading the data each time. The Janus button. At a certain point in the navigation, you'll come across the Janus button. This one's personal to me, and I want to take a moment to explain what it means and why it's here. Janus is the Roman deity of thresholds, of beginnings and endings, of the past and the future. He's depicted with two faces, one looking backward into what has been, and one looking forward into what's coming. I've carried Janus as something of a personal icon for how I approach this tradition. Astrology used properly does exactly what Janus does. It gives you the pattern of the past in enough clarity that you can see the shape of what's approaching. That's how I've always used it in my own life. There's a deeper layer of symbolism here worth sitting with. Janus is associated with Capricorn and Aquarius, the two signs that are adjacent on the wheel. These are the only two signs in the zodiac that share the same planetary ruler, which is Saturn. Capricorn is Saturn's diurnal home, cold, solid, the sign of structure, discipline, and the consolidation of everything that came before. Aquarius is Saturn's nocturnal home, fixed and airy, the sign of the future, of collective vision, of what comes after the structure has fully served its purpose. Together they form a single threshold, the boundary between the old cycle and the new one, between the elder and the youth, between what's been fully lived and what hasn't yet begun. This rhythm is what the Ouroboros represents, the symbol of the serpent, eating its own tail, that you'll find at the bottom of the Janus modal, the ending that contains within it the seed of the beginning. This is what every transit, every timing period, every chart is ultimately showing, the ongoing turn of the cycle. I built RADIX for my own personal use. I spent years studying this tradition seriously and developing the prompting architecture that powers the oracle. It was never originally intended to be a public product. I wrestled with the decision to release it because I've always been a firm believer in protecting the integrity of this art. There's already too much superficial astrology in the world, and I didn't want to add to it. But I ultimately decided to share it, and I believe that decision's in alignment with the spirit of this moment. We're in the age of Aquarius, however you choose to mark its beginning. And what defines this age above everything else is the democratization of information, knowledge, that was once locked behind closed doors, behind expensive consultations, behind rare books, behind the inner circles of practicing astrologers, should be accessible to the earnest seeker. This system is my attempt to make that possible, to give someone with genuine curiosity and the willingness to engage with this tradition access to the kind of depth that would have required years of study and thousands of dollars in consultation fees to reach. That's what RADIX is. That's why it was built, and that's why Janus stands at the threshold.